So I've been pretty strongly against the vaccine mandates. And whenever I start to feel strongly about something, it's a flag. Doesn't mean I'm wrong. It doesn't mean I automatically change course. But it's an anomaly to an extent. Most things don't elicit that type of response from me. They don't elicit that strong and confident of a viewpoint that something wrong is happening that I develop into this almost, to an extent at times, outrage over it and significant concern. So that makes me stop and pause. And I've had conversations with different people, and at least a couple people have indicated, like, I don't know if you're thinking about this right. So I would be hypocritical and frankly stupid to dismiss that and make pretend that they're just crazy, I see it right. I would be the epitome of the thing I'm trying not to be and the thing I talk about in these videos. So in the spirit of that, I've been thinking a lot about trying to empathize with that view and truly understand it and figure out what should I be doing. Through that, there's a Louis C.K. skit or comedy bit, and I get it. Louis C.K. is controversial, for some of his actions in the past. So without getting into all that, just kind of speaking on the concept in the bit, which is also controversial, by the way, but it's poignant, so I use it. He has a bit where he talks about abortion, and he's talking about people that are like extremely anti-abortion, people that blow up abortion clinics, right? People that are that against abortion that they feel the need and compelled to blow up these places. And I'll butcher the bit from a comedy perspective, but the spirit of it, the point of it, I think is such an important point. What he says is, regardless of what you think about abortion, if you're trying to understand those people, and I would argue implicit in what he's saying is you should try and understand those people. It only benefits you to try and understand those people. You have to understand whether they're right or wrong. In their minds, they're convinced in that building they're murdering babies. All right? Some people maybe don't. Some people maybe are being opportunistic or they're playing politics or whatever. Sure, there's some of those. But there's at least a good chunk of people where the reason they are so strongly against abortion, the reason they're willing potentially to blow up an abortion clinic is because they're killing babies in there. And that's such a powerful sentiment to me because, again, put aside as nuanced and complex and sensitive and all the things it should be, the conversation around abortion, put that aside for a second. That articulation of understanding the other perspective that maybe made no sense to you before. I could imagine a viewpoint which says, how fucking crazy do you have to be to blow up a building for abortions? Like, you're that crazy? You're that opposed to women having the right to choose about their own bodies? Like, you're worried about people dying, so you're willing to kill more people? Like, it's almost impossible to find the logical thread of how that makes sense. And that Louis C.K. bit articulated a way in which, at least for me, I'm not saying I agree with it, but I get it. I could relate to that. I could truly empathize with that and understand it. If I thought they were killing babies in a building, I'm sure I'd take some dramatic action too. So I say all that aside, because I think it ties back to the mandates and where I'm at. I'm trying to think of it through the lens for testing and to make sure I'm being objective and have clarity, that possibly some of the people, certainly just like the Louis C.K. abortion, bit, there's a good chunk of people, maybe not all of them, some of them are acting in bad faith, whatever, but there's a good chunk of people who are thinking, like, people are dying and they don't have to. Like, this is crazy. I get personal rights and liberties and freedoms. I get all that for sure. I get it. But for whatever reason, we have gotten to a place where this horrible pandemic hit. A lot of people died, and we fortunately have the science and the ability and the technology to stop it. Like, that's crazy. Think about throughout history how many instances where we couldn't stop it and people just died and there was nothing we could do about it. We have the power here to stop it. And for some reason, we're not. Whatever the reason is, it doesn't matter. It's not as important as the fact that we have the ability to save lives here. And that's that same parallel to they're killing babies in there. If you really believe that, of course you're going to be passionate about this. Of course you're going to be strong in your rhetoric about saying we have to get people vaccinated. You're going to be willing to do whatever you need to do to make that happen. Just like somebody would blow up an abortion clinic. Not saying the things are the same. It's the underlying principle I'm getting at, right? And when you think of it through that lens, at least for me, it helps me to understand, like, okay, this is not, it allows me to put humanity to it. It allows me to put humanity and logic to it, which is important because that's got to be what it's about. That's got to be the guiding light. And it doesn't mean that it's right. It doesn't mean that that's definitely what's happening. It doesn't mean that then, therefore, we should have the mandates or we should do whatever we need to do. But at least I can understand it. I can empathize with it better, which helps me to get more objectivity and clarity as I'm trying to figure out my viewpoint on it. So where do I go from there, right? That realization. It's good, but it's a means to an end. What's the end? Well, I would argue that you get to a place where you say, okay, let's assume that's true. Let's assume we could be saving all these lives. Well, then I think we have to put the pragmatic, logical lens on it and say, what is the most effective way for us to get everybody vaccinated? It seems as if, right, and again, let's give benefit of the doubt and assume it's acting in good faith. It seems as if the approach that's being taken right now is force it. And maybe they're right. Maybe they can run the calculations and they have actuaries or whatever types of analytics or predictive analytics that says the thing that's going to get you the most shots in arms, which you believe is truly the right thing to do because it's going to save lives, is forcing it. That's the quickest, best way to get there. And maybe that's true. I would have to think there's at least a good argument to be made, though, that it's not, right? We are where we are here. And then when you factor in and layer in the other aspects and consequences of this, right? The pushback from the people that feel like it's an overstep by government, the people losing their jobs, the position people being put in, all that, you have to at least consider the idea that there's a better way. That there's a better way to try and speak to people where they actually are and where the concerns are. Not to be, although I understand it, right? And there's a logic to it if we assume you're trying to save lives and all that. But it's not big L logical. It's not the most effective way. The most effective way is to speak to them where they are. What are your actual concerns? And then be honest. Be humble and be honest about where there's actually fair points there. And have an honest dialogue and conversation. Own up to the fact that the government isn't always trustworthy. So it's not crazy to think that somebody wouldn't just blindly trust it. Own up to the fact that there's been some inconsistencies and missteps in predicting how this is all going to play out. You know, at one point it was, there's no way we'll have a vaccine for the next couple of years, and now we have one. Well, okay, you have to reconcile that. That seems like that could be a risk point. Did we rush it? Right? You have to address that. If certain politicians at certain points said I wouldn't take the vaccine, and now they will take the vaccine, what happened there, right? Reconcile it. Let's figure it out. If there were points in which it was said that, well, now the pandemic's over because we're good, and now we're not over. All these things, right, show that there's a possibility, even if somebody's not acting in bad faith, that there's a miscalculation, that something might be off. So own that, acknowledge that, because to me, right, and I don't have the luxury of running all the data and predictive analytics, et cetera, so maybe I'm wrong, but again, I think you need to at least consider it. If you take that approach, I think you get more shots in arms. And at the same time, you give the opportunity, you maintain the opportunity for the truth to come out. If through that honest dialogue, it becomes uncovered that like, hey, you know what? Maybe we don't need to do a mandate. Maybe everybody doesn't need to be vaccinated. Maybe there is reason for some concern. Maybe, right? Well, then that should come out. So you have the double benefit of, I think you actually get people's trust. You build credibility, which enables you to get them to get more shots because they trust you more. They feel like you're acting in good faith. And if there's a reason, if there's something off in the logic, that should be exposed. That seems like a win-win. So even through my empathy with that side, and I do think that's important, and I do acknowledge that I might have been thinking of it too closed-minded in the past, I don't think it's binary. I don't think it's then, well, then you just jump to, we have to do anything and just demand it and force it. I still think there's a better way. You have to empathize with that other side as well and understand why they're not getting the shots. It's got to go both ways. And I think that gets us to the optimal solution, which is why conversations and dialogue like this is so important, because that's the way we get there.